Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host.
She's on track for running 20 kilometres this year so far,
Leanne Hughes.
G'day and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. If you're new to the show, welcome. I keep forgetting to welcome new listeners, but I've had a few people reach out over socials the last couple of weeks, and there's been a surge in people joining the Flipchart group on Facebook. So I just want to recognize you, say thank you so much for giving me your time, attention, and hopefully these episodes are helping you stamp out boring workshop experiences forever. That's my goal. It's pretty audacious. I need your help to make this happen around the world. It's been really great seeing all the inventive virtual facilitation games that are coming out. I've seen a few on Pinterest, over on Instagram, on LinkedIn. People are trying to get really creative with how they bring games and fun and energy to their online workshops. And one of those ideas was corporate word bingo. And I've got to say, if I was playing in that bingo game, the word that I would want on my bingo sheet is innovation. Innovation. It's a word. It's just thrown around all the time. And I worked in many different companies, ranging from government through to global corporate, that had innovation as a core value. And what I discovered, I'm not too sure if it's the same for you, but what I discover is that the way that we work, and it didn't facilitate innovation. It felt like it was just a value and it wasn't really lived. So that's why I got on today's guest. He specializes in facilitation for innovation. In fact, that is the theme of his YouTube channel. He's the kind of guy that if everyone's zigging, he'd be zagging. In fact, his LinkedIn tagline is this: innovation is like a street fight, and I've been in a few. My guest today is Joeri Schilders. He's full-time Dutch, living in Singapore, and he's an awesome YouTuber. Check out his channel, Joeri the Magic Sauce. It's funny, it's informative, it's valuable, and just really helpful videos if you're facilitating anything. I definitely recommend checking it out if you want some new ideas and bursts of inspiration. As I said, Joeri does facilitation for innovation, and he blends madness with measure, as well as speaking Mandarin, and he adds a bit of magic sauce as well. After having lived in the US, UK, and China for almost half his life, Joeri set up the Magic Sauce in Singapore in 2013, which is a boutique agency that works with global clients around their innovation challenges, culture, and capability. The Magic Sauce do that through facilitation, speaking, and content creation. Over the past decade and a bit, Joeri has worked on numerous challenges spanning from new product development across Asian emerging markets, digitising traditional manufacturing in Europe, to building systemic innovation cultures around the globe. He brings a ton of energy, a pragmatic approach, and fresh inspiration, which you'll pick up in this episode as well. And he speaks English, Mandarin, Dutch, and German. On this show, we talk about our relationship with clients. I mean, how much do you push back on what the brief is? And he gives a couple of tips on what you should pay attention to, the what and the why. And really, it's up to us as people that are external, even internally, if you're working with internal stakeholders, to suggest the how. I don't know if you picked it up in my rant earlier, the word innovation, I had to talk about it. What does it actually mean? Is it a value? Is it an outcome? It is a buzzword, but listen to how Joeri's company, The Magic Sauce, facilitate innovation in companies and help them take action and commit to innovating. He also shares his advice for facilitators around managing outcomes and how important that is. And he gives some insight on his YouTube channel that he's been building for a couple of years, and it relates to attention. And I think this is probably the biggest struggle for us as virtual facilitators now, is retaining attention. The great thing about YouTube is it provides data on when people actually log out. And wouldn't that be helpful for our presentations? Yeah, it would be harsh. And yes, we get that in tick sheets, but this is really different. If someone's taking action and leaving your webinar, there's sending a strong signal. I hope you enjoy this interview with Joeri. You can find show notes for this one over at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 126. And as always, if you'd like to continue the conversation when the podcast is over, join the Flipchart community on Facebook. I'd love to see you there. And of course, a link to Joeri's YouTube channel. He's also on the Flipchart. You can chat to him there. All in the show notes for this one. Can't wait for you to dive in and let me know what you think. Send me a tweet or Instagram DM at Leanne Hughes. Now, on to the show. I'd love to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Joeri, the magic source. Joeri, it's so great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. This is an absolute delight. We've been chatting for a bit. Now this is like real. We're like really talking and stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah. And everyone else in the world gets to listen as well. So I saw some of the videos that you posted in the flip chart group, and I remember looking at the first one and just going, oh my gosh, who is this guy? And I was getting all your ideas and then looking through your back catalogue. So I have an idea of who you are, Joeri, but can you share with our listeners, Joeri 101, like who are you? What's the kind of work that you do and how did you get here?
So my name is Joeri. I have a Russian name. I always say I'm full-time Dutch. It's a joke I've been using for the last 10 years. I live in Singapore and I facilitate innovation projects. So I came to Asia in the late 90s. I lived in China for 15 years and came to Singapore. And basically, with a bunch of my friends, I facilitate innovation projects. So what that means is either clients have a problem they need solved, or they're looking for new value, or they need to rethink the way they do things. And usually they come up with the same old. And then I come in with a bunch of friends. We like to call ourselves the Avengers, just that we don't wear spandex. And then based on everything that we learn on projects, I create videos about that. So I've basically taken a lot of the learning from projects, like real work rather than theoretical stuff, and then created videos from those.
So cool. How did you get into innovation? Have you always sort of been creative and had crazy ideas? I mean, is that even what innovation is about?
Innovation is a word that is used a lot. I actually read once that Philips, the company Philips, uses the word innovation about 1 million times more than they actually do it. So there's a lot of talk about innovation, but it also has different meanings to different people. At the end of the day, it's just coming up with something new that has value to me. I don't want to overcomplicate it. And creativity is, I once learned if innovation is an engine, then creativity is the oil that makes the engine run. So creativity is an ingredient. So you have a creative idea, a new connection you made in your mind, something new you came up with, which we all have all the time. It's then taking that idea and turning that into something tangible. That's where innovation happens. How I got into it, because my dad was an entrepreneur before that was even a word. So self-employed business, import-export business. So I grew up with parents who worked for themselves. My mom was a hairdresser and my mom taught arts and crafts. So my mom had kind of the creative angle and my dad had the, I started work at 15 and I don't have time to fool about, kind of that hard business side. So I grew up with kind of madness and measure. And those are two of the main ingredients I think you need for innovation. So I think it's in all of us at home a little bit. We're all a bit different in that way. And when I moved to China, I worked in a small consulting company. I facilitated projects there, workshops there, trainings there, a lot of learning, also a lot of development for young potentials in Chinese companies or in foreign companies in China. And at one point I was approached for a job in Shanghai by a company called What If Innovation. They're like an independent innovation agency. And they wanted somebody who had that madness and that measure, but could do it all in Mandarin. Now, madness and measure, there are quite a lot of people. There's a lot of people who can do that, right? There's probably a lot of creative people, either from agency or corporate side, both, like wherever they come from. And they might have a different spin on what innovation creativity is. But you can find people like that. But once you add the filter for, they need to be fluent in Mandarin to be able to facilitate in Mandarin as well.
Yeah.
I was like, hi, that's me.
When did you learn to speak Mandarin?
So my degree is in Mandarin. So I studied Mandarin in university. Okay. So I have a degree in Mandarin for international business and trade, which really helped me in facilitation because when I lived in China, a lot of the facilitation I did was in Mandarin because we dealt with local teams. So just being able to speak the language just makes a connection with people a lot easier. And particularly at that time, a lot of people, at least in China, had this whole, well, you're a foreigner, you don't know what that means. You're a foreigner, you don't understand China. Or he's another foreigner telling us Chinese how to do our business. And I think by just speaking Mandarin, you just break right through that. You kind of just make it easy for everybody in that room.
It's really quite futuristic of you to have decided to focus on Mandarin back at university because
that's quite random, by the way.
Was it? It's something I wish I'd stuck with in grade 7. I mean, I know ni hao and a few words, like my brother is.
That was good enough. That'll get you quite far already.
Thank you.
I think it was a bit of coincidence. I think, first of all, my parents traveled a lot. So even at a young age, I went to Taiwan, I went to Singapore very early on, all over Europe, other places. And both my brother and my sister all did. So we all traveled quite a bit. We went to different places. I think it's a bit more common now for Europeans to travel to Asia. It wasn't in the 80s. It was a bit more like, whoa, that's really far. So I already had an idea that I wanted to live somewhere else. But Mandarin literally came up because I had detention. I had to sweep the hallways. And the dean of the school, when I must have been like 16 or something, walked by and he started talking about what we wanted to do after secondary school. I had no idea. And he gave us a little flyer that said, studying in uni or What is your next step in your studies? I had no idea. And on the back of that, one of the studies was studying Mandarin. And I literally went, I'm pretty good at languages and music. I didn't know what to do because I was going to be a rock star anyway. Like literally, I told my mom at 15, like, why do I need to go to school? I'm going to be a rock star. And my mom, the sweetest person that she was, she would always say, that's okay, sweetheart. Just in case you two don't call you, why don't you get a degree?
Maybe you can sing in Mandarin.
Maybe you can sing in Mandarin, but like just get that piece of paper. So that's why it was just something that was different, and it was a language. And I thought, when you were Dutch and you say, I'm fluent in German and French, nobody will blink an eye because it's quite common for Danes or Belgians or even a lot of Germans and French who speak multiple languages. So I had to do something different, and a bit different from Dutch is Mandarin.
That's a really interesting story. Thanks for sharing it. And on the topic of innovation, it was 2 years ago, I was kind of overworking for companies that had innovation as a value. It seemed that like every company in Australia, it was one of the top 5 values. So like, how do you differentiate? Anyway, I got a virtual assistant just to hop online and to search for the ASX 200 and to search for every company that had innovation as its value. And it was about 50%.
There's only one problem. Innovation is not a value. Innovation is an output of energy. That's what it is.
Interesting.
Because what does that mean if it's a value? I value innovation. Sure, I value money. I value cats. And I've seen this so many times where it's on the wall, like, but it's a core value to our business. But it's not a value. Innovation is an output of creativity, creative thinking, critical thinking, a bit of luck, a lot of work, spotting opportunities, and actually making something that's of any value. And with a bit of luck, that innovation goes on to being successful. So I never understood when people say it's a value.
Well, I particularly didn't understand it because the irony was that all these companies that had innovation were not innovative. That was the true. I mean, it's a lot like that with a lot of values. But why then do people hold it as a value on a pedestal, but then you go into the organization and it's anything but innovative? You're not seeing that output. What's going on? What's not working?
That's a great question, actually. Oh, it is. I mean, I've got a point of view. I always have a point of view. Not that they always matter, but two things I think here. I think one, I think it's just popular. I think about 10 years ago, particularly after 2008, everybody went, okay, we need to innovate. First of all, innovation has been around forever. It's nothing new. It's just that we give it different words and different titles, and we have different, I guess, role models of innovation nowadays. Now it's, Elon Musk is a bit crazy, but he's way out there in jobs, and we usually have the typical white male CEOs we see as innovators, but innovation comes at many different levels and always has. So it's popular. It's popularized, particularly in 2008 and 9. I think the other one is people want the outcome of it. People like the rogueness of going, I disrupted this industry, or I disrupted this business or this market. The reality is many people are not willing to put in the hard work and are not willing to go through the pain, because most things that are necessary for innovation go literally against the grain of everything that big traditional business do. I mean, it usually starts with an idea, starts with 1 or 2 people, set it up, they grow to a level. Then all of a sudden you get a lot of structures because you want to maintain and grow and scale that business. Well, that scaling of the business is completely different from that initial kind of spark and the quick growth. That's why we see more fast moving in startups. We find them more creative. Well, because they have to. They don't have a lot of money to blow on stuff. So they are scrappy, they're quicker, they have to be. Right? A startup is like a little boat like this, and most corporations are just massive oil tankers. They're just much harder to maneuver. So they all say they want to have innovation. I think they all need it, most of them. I mean, look at Big Pharma. Big Pharma really hasn't come up with anything really disruptive and really changing in the last so many years. There's a lot of smaller technologies, but they're all kind of waiting for that next big disruption.
A vaccine.
Either a vaccine or something. I think the last one that really made big money, or like made a big bang, was Viagra or something. And that was accidental. Viagra was an accidental innovation. But I think a lot of people want the outcome of that, but I don't think they want to put in the work. So it's easy to say, yes, we are an innovative organization, and there's a lot of talk about it, and people buy clever books and they bring in clever professors and clever consultants. There's a lot of talk, right? So what are you actually going to do? And I think the bigger that conversation becomes, the bigger this conversation of innovation becomes in the board of directors room, the less you're going to do it. It should be in like small everyday pockets. And to do that, unfortunately, you need the opposite of management. Sometimes you need to let go of certain things. You need to have a bit of structure in place. Don't just go like, let's just be creative, guys. Let's go. That's another horrible strategy. There needs to be structure. But once that's there, put some money behind it. Give people some real time. You say you want people to come up with something new. Well, it's not going to happen overnight. So what are you going to do about it? And I've seen it so many times where there's a lot of talk about, they say they want something disruptive, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's like whittling it back down to something that fits, because there's a culture of fear, there's politics going on. So if it's wrong, I might get fired or I might lose credibility. One of the reasons a lot of companies like to use agencies and consultancies, because if it goes wrong, then, well, it wasn't me, it was company X that told us to do that, which is quite sad. And to me, then innovation is particularly on this side of the planet, in Asia here, Southeast Asia. I usually go for, let's do something small. Don't overthink it. Let's pick a project. Let's work on something real and then take it from there. Rather than going, let's do an overhaul and let's do a big campaign. And on the next town hall, we're going to talk about how innovative we are. Stop talking about it. Start doing it. It's like somebody saying, like, I used to, I want to get fit. I want to get fit too. Yeah, I got some great plans to get fit. So, okay, so when are we going for that run then?
Yeah.
Go for
guilty.
A walk.
Guilty.
No, but so it's a same analogy.
So when you are working with these organizations and stepping in there and having to facilitate innovation and getting to think and actually take action, that's the biggest challenge, I think, for facilitators is we can inspire, share some ideas, but when we leave, what's really happening? So do you actually embed yourself within the organization, or how do you ensure that change is happening? They are taking action on things that you're discussing?
Great question. And I get asked this actually quite a lot. How does that work? So first of all, this is about facilitation. Your channel is about facilitation. I'm actually not a traditional facilitator, as in I break a lot of the traditional rules of facilitation. And one of the rules I break a lot, and I don't know whether this is good or bad, it's just the way I work, is I'm not always neutral. I know as a facilitator very often it's like you have to be neutral and provide the framework and you allow them to come up with the findings and stuff. And I used to be more like that because I had a lot more theory in my mind about innovation. And what I realized is once I started running real projects with real money and real people on the table, that most of the things I learned before just did not work at all. It's great in theory. It does not work on the streets or out there. So right now I push harder. So I don't just facilitate and let them do it. I will actually push for certain outcomes. At the end of the day, they have to own the ideas or the insights or the strategy, but I will push much harder than a lot of other facilitators would. And that's because if I can see that there's an opportunity, there's a light right over there, but nobody's seeing it, why would I go the long, lengthy way of meandering through something if I go, guys, it's right over there?
Yeah.
Whether they go for that or not, that's up to them. But I push much harder. And it's because there's real money on the table. And that changes a couple of things. If it's learning is different, you can go, well, you have to own the learning and learning has to be visceral and comes from you. I get all that. I'm with that. But sometimes somebody comes in and says, hey, we've got this business model. And if we don't do something in the next 6 to 12 months, we're screwed. Like we will be royally screwed. What are we going to do? And at that time, there's nothing wrong with coming in with a point of view.
No pressure, or even a client comes to you and says, we need you to turn things around. I mean, there's a bit of pressure there. So
the first thing is like, there's a lot of things that are not within my control. So be realistic about what you can deliver.
Yeah.
And what I'll usually do is, so I had one a while back when work was still flourishing before COVID-19, who said, how do you know this is going to work? Like, I mean, you guys, you're not cheap. You charge quite a bit. You've got a team of people working on this. How do you know this is going to work? And I went, I don't. And they go, well, then how can you send us a proposal for this? I'm like, well, I don't know whether this is going to work because everybody's a bit different. Every organization is different. I can tell you that when we worked with this industry or with that client and that client, this is kind of what happened. So why don't we take what we learned from there and apply that to your world? So rather than saying, I know this is going to work, at least now I can say, well, I've run more than 100 projects. I don't have the answers, but we have an approach, we have a way and a certain momentum and energy behind us that will get you further faster. Now, whether we're going to crack this nut within a week or a month or a year, I don't know. But you sitting there right now going, we need to do something, is not helping either. So let's just get something going. The second part of your question, do you embed yourself in the organization? We've done that in the past where we've stayed on a lot longer to help them with the execution. A lot less now. And I think traditionally clients always thought, oh, we're good at that ourselves. We just want the strategy, the insights, the ideas, and some prototypes, and then we'll do it ourselves. The reality is usually not. Like, unless there's some really good time set aside, money put aside, they'll lose the momentum really, really quickly. And I don't blame them for that. It's just because other stuff takes over.
Yeah.
So that's the first conversation before we even get into any facilitation, any project, kind of going, cool. So we'll come up with a solution. What are you going to do? How's that going to work? Where's the money going to come from? Do you have a purchase order yet? Okay. If you think coming up with an idea is hard, actually taking that idea to reality is 100 times that energy.
Yeah. I love how you said purchase order. Because that's like the hardest thing to get in an organization.
Sure. You have money set aside for it. Where is the money going to come from? Because, if you want to implement whatever the idea is, we're not talking about ideas for the Christmas party, right? I mean, you can do it over a Zoom call. We're talking about whatever. Like a couple of years ago, I worked in Germany on a manufacturer, basically a company that makes zinc products for like gutter pipes. So imagine they have really old machines that are like 80 to 100 years old factory, where they smelt metal and then it comes out in forms and they cut it. And they wanted to use smart trackers and smart sensors across the entire manufacturing pipeline to improve the output. So the brief was, what can we do with smart technology and with digital tools to take down our failure rate from 10% to 6%? Those are like typical kind of briefs. That's not a one-day ideation workshop. That requires you understanding the entire pipeline. That's require you to work with other partners who can provide those trackers. What can you do? And it just takes a lot longer. It just takes a lot of time. And it's usually a lot more complex than people think. So it depends on what kind of projects you work on. But in general, we now leave them with a bunch of prototypes, working prototypes, and a plan of, here's what you need to do, like literally dictated. You need to assign this person. Your team needs so many hours. We can coach along the way. We can be part of this. Usually the client says, no, we're fine without you. Unfortunately, very often they're not.
Like, need your help.
Very often, very often they're not. And then they call again when something needs fixing, right? At the end of the day. It's just really hard. I mean, getting back to the original question, if innovation were that easy, where you bought some book written by somebody that says the 7 steps to successful innovation, well, why wouldn't we all be doing it? Because it's hard. And the biggest challenge isn't speed to market. It isn't technology. Technology is there. We have more than enough technology. A friend of mine always says, don't worry about technology.
I agree.
Once you know what you want, find somebody. There's a whole bunch of startups out there doing amazing things. That's not hard. It's politics. It's the people BS that always slows everything down. It's the whole, we'll only adopt it if it's an idea that we believe in. Does it suit my agenda? Does this project get in the way of what I'm trying to do? And that, in my opinion, is like 90% of the projects that went off is politics. It's just the saddest thing ever. So when I talk to clients and they want to go, we need to innovate better, then start there. Start looking at how you work together, how people communicate, what kind of behaviors do you tolerate on your team. If you have a culture where a couple of people are the clever ones in the company, they get paid more, they have a higher title, and they are very dismissive because they're clever. So when I share an idea, they're like, yeah, well, you don't understand this. You haven't been in the business. If that's your culture, you're not going to come up with new ideas. And you're young and new people are not going to do anything. I did this great thing, which I learned from a friend of mine. I was trying this out, and it's worked really well, actually, on future casting. So basically saying, let's look 1, 2, 3, 4 years ahead, and let's see where the opportunities lie. And nobody can predict the future, but there's a way of doing it. The way we do it is we bring in a bunch of trends from within their industry, but also adjacent, and kind of go, if this is what's going to happen with technology, geopolitically, we're moving that way, and this business is investing there, what could be the implication of that? And again, it's possible, it's guesswork. But we're looking at trends. And one way, which a friend of mine said that we should do, and I've tried this a couple of times, is by inviting the youngest people, basically saying to the client, anybody who's been in your business longer than 12 months can't come. At least not in the beginning.
Love it. Yeah.
And it's not their fault because they know that much about their business. They're often very entrenched in their business. The frog in the well principle here. So sometimes the best thing to do is just get these young kids and you say, you can't go wrong. Keep those guys out. You can't go wrong. What do you think it is? And tell me what's going on. I mean, it's hilarious to be in a room with a board of directors of guys in their 50s, no offense to guys in their 50s, talking about kind of Gen Zs, kind of going, well, why are we talking about this? Why are we sitting in a boardroom? Is there no better way to do this? So sometimes shaking that up a bit is important, but the company has to be open for that. And again, sometimes it's more about, we talk about it, we say it's important, but structurally, like you just said, there's nothing that we're doing that actually supports this.
Have you seen that Yves Moreau TED Talk? 6 ways to simplify. You will love it. I'll put it in the show notes.
Please.
This French guy, and he's just going to town on innovation and how it doesn't work because of all the systems and how we're complicating it. I remember watching it. I was like kind of virtually high-fiving this guy and going, yes, this is the message the world needs. Yeah. Same as the whole thing about innovation, it's almost similar to leadership as well. I mean, we're all about, we need more humble and authentic leaders, and there's like hundreds of thousands of books on it, but yet we still see the same type of leaders in organization. Yes. So counterintuitive. Like the more content and information there is on a topic, it's like maybe we're more aware now of the lack.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that tell you? So just stop reading a million books about leadership. Just start actually doing something. Same with innovation. Right. We can talk about it all we want. You can just get started. I don't know how to get started. It's not that hard. If you really don't know what to do, you want to do small innovation in your business, as a CEO, get up and ask your entire company, tell me about all the little things that we do every day that get in the way of you doing your work. Something really, let's start there.
That's a good question.
Collect those, honestly, put them in the next, if you can do it anonymous, however you want to do it, and kind of say, I bet you there's like 4 things that will come through.
Oh, I think seven of the 8 hours I used to work were things that just got in the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
I shouldn't blame business on that because I also do it to myself. I'm like my own worst boss. Just keep busy. Well, it's like, well, how effective are things?
Same.
Yeah. So here we are talking about it. How funny. I want to talk about your YouTube channel, actually. There was no segue or anything. That was just like a sharp right turn into the conversation.
Love it. I'm okay. I train fighting. I'm used to doing.
All right. So what I love about your content is it's funny, it's relevant to all facilitators. Anyone that's listening to this will pick up something from your channel. Awesome. You really talked a lot about virtual facilitation in the last few months. So what are you noticing in terms of virtual facilitation? Have you been on the end of webinars and what are some tips for people that are trying to find their feet? They love the face-to-face workshops. Now they're moving to this new medium. They're struggling. What do you have to say to them?
Well, first of all, I don't think the future is virtual workshops. I think it will.
Thank you.
No, I don't think it is. I really don't think it will just be on Zoom calls all day. I don't think so. By the way, if people from Zoom are listening, Zoom, you're doing incredibly well. And all that tells me is there's a whole bunch of competitors ready to take over right now. So stay sharp. Don't get complacent. I don't think the future is just going to be virtual workshops. I think, first of all, at a very basic human level, we need human connection. I think a lot of people are realizing that, some people more than others. I remember in the beginning, all the extroverts were like, oh, this is a great time for us. We don't have to deal with people. But they're getting a bit anxious now as well. So we all need human connection. I don't think the future is virtual workshops. I think what it showed us that a lot of things can be done online. Let's be fair. I got flown from Shanghai to Denver, Colorado once to do a talk, a 45-minute talk from Shanghai to Denver, Colorado. That was a 35-hour trip on a nice plane that probably pollutes a lot. That pollutes the air a lot. The carbon footprint of that is ridiculous. Now, I enjoy going there because I get flown to Denver, Colorado. I've never been, and it was so cool. Yeah. And the first day I got there, it was sunny, and then the second day I left, it was snowing already, and the client was lovely.
Did you get to the Rockies or anything like that? No.
I saw them, but I didn't have enough time because I had to go back to work. But that's ridiculous. I really enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed travel. I used to travel a lot for work. I think one year, 2006-07, I did about 62 flights per year, which is a lot. I don't think that's the future anymore. So I think a lot of things can be done online, and these things will only get better. Now, it might be holographic in a couple of years. There might be some new and different disruptions that will happen because I think they will really require some big disruptions that will change the way we work and change the way we interact with each other. So that's first off. So I don't think the future will just be Zoom calls and things. I think it will be a hybrid, but it's open up opportunities. What I have, however, seen, though, and the reason I say it needs a bit of disruption, what I've seen a lot of people do is take the exact same format they would have in a room and just go, okay, let's put a webcam on it. And that unfortunately does not work. And it's for a very simple reason. I heard somebody said this the other day on a podcast, and it really resonated with me. He says, well, if you're physically in the same room, you're at a leadership conference, and somebody's waffling on about his new book about leadership and whatever it is. No offense to leadership gurus out there, but there's too many of you. You're there. Like, you actually can't leave. It's a bit rude to leave and you can't pay money. The reality is online, I can just click away. Honestly,
absolutely.
I can literally click away or get distracted. So people will give you less, they'll be less tolerant, I think. They'll be a bit more like get to the point. And it's harder to engage with people through virtual means. So taking exactly what you do normally in the physical workshop, putting that online is not working. I do not want to sit here for 8 hours in a workshop. I think that's ridiculous. I like to keep things to about 90 minutes. Now, we can do several chunks because innovation is not a one thing. Usually when we work, let's start with scoping. So understand the brief, then let's look at all the research you have. Let's look at insights. We'll do a bit of research. We'll meet you back here for some quick share back, et cetera, 90-minute bursts, ideally 45 minutes is more than enough. And you can do a little bit in between if you can. Usually we go like, unless you do the things in between, don't come back to the session. So there's a little session here. We're going to meet you again on Friday. Read this. And if you haven't read this, don't come because you're wasting everybody's time. I bully my clients a bit on that kind of stuff.
Can you give me some of that confidence with clients? It's awesome.
Well, the reason I say that is because, one, I learned this from my dear friend, Andy, and Andy will be listening to this one. So Andy's been a really good friend, a great mentor, and a lot of facilitation I learned was from Andy and other people as well. But Andy and I still work together a lot. We used to fly a lot around the world and work together. And he would say, like, it's okay to bully your clients. You don't have to be the service provider. And I see this in Singapore and in China a lot. Agencies are at this receiving end, like, you're the client. We need to listen to everything you're saying. No, have a bit more confidence. If you know what you're doing, if you're that good, you should be able to push back. It's a partnership. Yes, I know that your client, they're paying you. But if you want to be taken seriously and you want to get something done, you're going to need to be a bit stronger. The reason I say I bully them, because it's not fair to other people. The reason people hate meetings is because everybody waffles about, nobody's prepared, everybody's in a different mode. If you want to use a Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono, one is in questioning mode, the other one's in critiquing mode, the other one's in, I don't know what the hell is going on mode. Everybody's got different modes. So if people don't do their part a bit or come prepared, you're wasting everybody's time. The reason I'm so adamant about that is because I know one of the biggest reasons facilitation gets a bad name, workshops get a bad name, and meetings get a bad name, because there are a lot of crap meetings out there run by people who are poorly prepared, who don't know how to run them, who think they are facilitated just because they're the highest paying officer in the room holding a pen. That doesn't make you facilitated. Facilitation is a skill you can learn. It's an artful skill. So the reason I tell them not to come is because I don't want to waste other people's time. So getting back to the point of virtual workshops, I think it will be a hybrid. I think it will be disrupted. I don't think taking everything you have and putting that straight onto the screen is going to work. So one of the biggest tips I see is people looking for technology, as in looking for the answer in technology, the lights, the camera, the this and this. It's not. It still comes down to everything I've seen, at least. Absolutely. There might be a lot of other examples. A lot of things I've seen is, guys, there's no clear agenda. There's no difference between this virtual and real. You're still not well prepared. You invited the wrong people because some manager said that these people need to sit in your session. And that's why they become long, onerous, and no output. So the future of virtual meetings, my advice would be, stop overthinking the word virtual. Just get better at making your meetings crisper and manage for an outcome.
Like the word crisper. What's been interesting is, okay, so I've worked in corporate a year out.
What did you do, by the way?
I was working in a global talent management role, running leadership programs. I'm not a leadership guru. I don't claim to be.
I have your book right here.
Definitely want to write a book, but it won't be on leadership. And they run these conferences which go from 9 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. They cram it full of content. So as a facilitator, when you're asked to deliver something, it's like, right, we've got to pack out that day because I provide the most value by smashing everyone with information for like 8 or 9 hours. And we all know that doesn't work. People are exhausted by the time the day is over, or through it after lunch. It's crazy. Now, what I'm also noticing about virtual is having to be a little bit lazy. What do I mean by that? Well, you mentioned it. It's like cutting down the chunks of time. So something that was all day, it's like, can we do a couple of 45-minute sessions? I had a 45-minute session last week, and I think 20 minutes of that was a breakout room. So literally I'm just sitting there like everyone's broken out and I'm just hanging out. And I think, gosh, I'm getting paid for this. And I think probably another mindset thing for us to shift as well when we move virtual is like realize creating that process, the way that, people are interacting and keeping engaged, but also remember to maybe be a bit lazy.
Well, but you can be, because at the end of the day, look at outcomes. If you can deliver the outcome, how you do that, whether you do that in an hour, in a day, that's up to you. Sometimes things require a day. Sometimes they require 10 minutes. That is up to you. I think for a lot of facilitators, I have a feeling, this is a guess, I don't know whether that's true. Some people think I need to make my sessions longer so it looks like I'm doing more work.
Exactly.
I can't charge the same for 45 minutes as I do.
Yes.
Like, no, if we're getting you from A to B, you're going to pay the same money. Fine, you're saving some cost on flying and on traveling, but why would that be less? We're getting you from A to B.
Faster, yeah.
I haven't had the time conversation with clients as in, well, I can see that it's a 4 hours. Can we turn this into 3 hours?
I know.
Right?
Alan Weiss talks about that.
Leave the how to us.
That's right, yeah. That's really good. I like that message. I'm reading a book at the moment, Alan Weiss, $1 Million Consulting, and he talks all about that value-based pricing. Yeah, I'm talking to Alan next Friday.
Nice. I'll be sure to listen to that one. That'll be very interesting. Cool. He's an interesting man.
Yeah, he's another guy that probably bullies his clients a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I do it in a cheeky way.
Exactly. And he does it the same way. Like some of his anecdotes are like, wow, that's so brazen. I can't believe he said that. But it works for him. It's his style. You
have to build rapport first before you do that. On the other side, I think you have to be assertive. I see a lot of, like I said, particularly facilitators, very much listening to what the client says. I literally had one a couple of months ago. Somebody came in and said, look, I didn't know this person. I got an email saying, can you run a workshop? That was basically the request. At the moment I hear that, that's the first flag, because a workshop is one way.
It's a medium, yeah.
It's one way. There's other ways. So forget about the workshop. Usually mine is like, forget about workshop for a second. Tell me more about the brief. This girl's quite young, very switched on, very smart, quite articulate. But it turned into this, it's a 3-hour workshop and they want and trends and future and they want a bit of design thing. And I went, okay, stop. I said, first of all, you're giving me 5 briefs in one. That's not one brief. You're giving me 5. I said, and it sounds like the client is telling you what to put in. I don't know what it's like in Australia. Here on this side of the planet, a lot of people tend to think the more we cram in, the better it is.
Yes, it's the same here.
That turns into a cocktail, which is like a Negroni with a bit of muesli.
It's like poison. Yeah, that's right.
No.
You don't want to drink that cocktail.
It would be crap. And that was the thing. But this client had basically gone, oh, yeah, well, they're there. I could just do some design thing. And they went, okay. I'm like, stop saying okay. Go back to drawing board and say we can't deliver that. And that's what I mean with bullying. I think you just have to be a bit stronger because it's your reputation on the line. For me, it's like, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this long enough. I'm not saying that I know your business better, which is a great example for you as a facilitator. Maybe you've had this before. We were brought into this company by one level down from the CEO. So quite senior people, us in this case, they looked at different agencies. We got picked to come and help them with an innovation brief. So rethinking of their business model. Usually to build up to this one, I like to talk to a couple of people before I meet them. So just 4 or 5 random 12-minute calls. Yeah. Tell me a bit more. So what's innovation to you? Tell me about this challenge. It gives me a bit of context. It gives me a bit of language about how they speak. They get to know me. By the time you walk into a room, this little trick, by the way, you know 3-4 people, they'll be less likely to be like, who is this asshole? So they're a bit more, they could be a bit more standoffish. And just by meeting a couple of people, you then go, oh, Peter, right? Remember we talked last week? Oh, yes, hi. It just makes things a bit more pleasant. So I talked to a bunch of people and I want to talk to the CEO, who's a Russian guy. And Russians can be quite direct. Now, the good thing is I'm Dutch. I'm very, very direct as well. And he basically started the conversation by saying, look, I want to be very clear about something. I don't like consultants because if you think you can walk into my business and tell me how to do my work, you must be crazy. That's basically what he said. And I said, well, the good news is that 1, I'm not a consultant. And 2, I hope you know more about your business than we do, or else we have a much bigger problem. I'm not here to tell you how to run your business. What we're good at is giving you an outside perspective based on a lot of projects we've run with other companies in other industries in other countries that might be of relevance to you. Second, we ask questions like a 5-year-old child. We go, why do you do that? And they go, well, it's part of our standard operating procedures. Now, I get that, but why do you do it? Oh, well, McKinsey sold us this big. Okay, well, that was in 1997. There's new technology now, which makes that one irrelevant. So we get to kind of poke holes. We don't know all the answers. We just have to poke holes a bit. And I think to be able to lead a group like that, you have to have a bit of confidence and you need to be able to say, I'm not going to tell you how to run your business, but don't tell me how to put together my facilitation, my workshops and my projects, because that's when it gets a bit messy and nobody wants to drink that cocktail. So keep your grubby mitts out of my glass. You know?
What did the Russian CEO, how did he respond? Was he like, oh, respect?
Really well. Really, yeah. He instantly went for, oh, okay. That's kind of the response. He didn't say it like that, but he's basically was like, you want to come in and change my business? No, we don't. That's up to you. What we're here to do is challenge a couple of things, give you a couple of stories and examples of what other people have done. Maybe there's something interesting in there for you to rethink. Because we don't know your industry, but the problem you're having, I've seen that about 5, 6, 7 times. And the problem was something like, we used to be a small company, now we're really big. How do we keep scaling but stay nimble? That is not a new challenge. There's a lot of business that are struggling with that every day. There's like, third round funding startups that are growing, turning into SMEs, into business. They're doing exactly the same thing. Oh, now we got 100 people. What are we going to do? So that challenge isn't new. A lot of the work that we do is not necessarily super original. It's often understanding that challenge really well and then going, where else have I seen this? Let's take some of this and let's see what this does.
Yeah, really, I want to talk more about how you prepare for facilitation, but that phrase originality, I just don't know if it even exists. Like everything I read is just pulling from 2 different books or this philosopher, and it's just like, as you said, connecting just different ideas to create something new. I just don't know if anything original exists anymore. But
I don't know.
Well, that's a whole other conversation. Let's talk about, and I love when you told your mum that you wanted to be a musician when you were 15.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how that has influenced you as a facilitator or as someone giving a speech in terms of your presentation skills and bringing in that performance element. Have you found that there's an influence?
Absolutely, because we were just talking about video as well, right? I think if you want to create videos, I'll start with the video bit and get into the music.
Yeah, cool.
If you want to create videos nowadays, what a lot of people underestimate is that you almost need a level of entertainment in it. So you can be the best speaker on, let's say, change management. But if you're not engaging, if you can't draw in people within the first 7, 8, 9 seconds, people click away. That's hard. That's not my opinion. That is things I can see from my other people's YouTube channels. I can see exactly when people click away. And I look back at 100 videos and go, oh, I started waffling on about, hi, my name is Joeri. I'm really interesting. And I went to the school of interesting people. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. So being able to kind of start really strong, reel them in, and end strong with kind of a call to action is like paramount. It doesn't matter. You can be the best on whatever. If you can't deliver that, people just click away. And it doesn't matter how long or how good your video is.
I remember watching something, I don't know when it was, but it was talking about TV. And if you're watching a movie, a good movie, like there's a change of a shot like every 4 or 5 seconds. We don't even know what's happening, just to change our focus and attention. So now I'm trying to think about, how do I do that in a virtual setting? Do I have like a couple of cameras, or it's more like tell a story then show this? And so I'm thinking, how do I make that shift? So how do you do that with your videos? I mean, you use cool things like animations and sounds to add that. Is that what your strategy is? Well,
videos is, I have a lot more control of videos because I pre-record them. It's not live, of course. So I can cut between bits and pieces. I usually have one idea. I tell a bit of a story around it. I work them up in about 5 post-its. I don't do scripts. I kind of riff on stuff.
Cool.
And the reason I can do that, because most of the things I talk about are things I was part of, not things I read in a book. It's like, well, my friend Tim taught me this, and here's an example he used. So that makes it easier. Then I cut between, I do little things to make it faster. There's something called jump cuts. A lot of YouTubers do that. A lot of filmmakers hate it. It's just where you don't leave any pause between
I like
words.
it.
You go nice and fast.
Yeah, it's easy to follow.
To keep that pacey. So that's one of the things I do. And I think that can be used for virtual workshops as well. I think half the things we do in virtual workshops can be pre-recorded, and then people can watch it on the phone while they're on the bus. Why would you have to do that live? Why do you have to sit in a meeting for an hour when somebody plays back research they did around old people in Singapore? Send that to people. If you have slides, if you want to present slides, why didn't you just record a video? There's tools like Loom. I know when Loom is literally
I use it every day.
Show your slides, put your face in it, and go, okay, guys, so we did some research here in Singapore, and we kind of found 3 major insights. Send that to people. It's a 5-minute video. So I think using those different kinds of media more. Cool. And if you want to get clever, I just bought this one. I'm going to play around with that one. I don't know whether I'm going to like it or not. It's called a Stream Deck.
Oh, that's what Pat Flynn uses in his daily YouTube, like to is it?
Basically, you can switch, let's say, cameras to slides to sounds. You can do a whole bunch of different things with it, which I'm going to play around with. Maybe it works for me, maybe it doesn't. But even if you don't have that, even if it's one camera on you like that, honestly, I bet you if you do a bit of a talk and say, okay, let's go for a little breakout room. And when you come back from the breakout room, you've just moved your camera a bit. You've moved to a different place. You wear a different shirt. You play a bit of music. But even things like that will change it up. You don't have to get gimmicky with it. If you just have let's say you just have a laptop, you don't have anything else, move to a different room. Honestly, stand up.
Wear a different hat.
Wear a different hat. You can do all kinds of stuff. So you said something about being lazy before. I'm not lazy per se, but I often think before we make it really complex, there must be a simple way to do this. And I've noticed that really simple things kind of work. You ask like, what is your favorite energizer? I've got heaps of activities in games. I'm not a big fan of the silliness of games if it's for the sake of silliness, but I'm not afraid of it either. You know, I spoke at a 500 people global leadership for an oil and gas company, and I played a game called Dance Like Your Uncle. This is hilarious. You don't do it on the first day. You need people a bit more relaxed by that time. But the whole point is like every family will have some kind of party. There's always that one uncle that thinks he can dance, and everybody plays that. They go like, it's either their dad or it's that uncle. So I'm going to play some music, and I want you all to dance like your uncle. And it's a bit of silliness. They're all men, but they can work. But my go-to energizers are usually much simpler. They're like, I understand people can concentrate for so many minutes. So after 10-minute introduction, I'll go, great. So that was a lot of information for you. So before we get started, can you just stand up, find somebody in the room, and I want you to talk about like the one thing you're looking forward to today. Go.
Yeah.
Keep it really simple. Like
exactly.
If you want to do hats and rubber chickens and let's build a tower, if you want to do that, by all means, whatever works for you. I don't need them to be very complex.
Love that.
So I played in different bands since I was like 15 years old. As a guitarist, bass player, singer, guitarist. I'm not good at anything, by the way. I just like to have a lot of fun. And music was my way of communicating with the world, I guess, like being a teenager with long hair, and I was going to be a rock star. So I played in all kinds of different bands. So I played in a band in Beijing called Rage Against the Karaoke Machine.
That's
hilarious.
clever.
Yeah, a friend of mine came up with the name, Rage Against Karaoke Machine. And we had so much fun together. At that time, we all had played in bands for about 10 years. And the reason that's relevant is because when you start in a band, at least I did, it was all about me. I was very focused on me and on how I played my instrument. So I wasn't even in tune with other people in the band, let alone with people actually watching you. And as you get a bit more experience, you realize, well, it's actually all about the audience, which then has an impact on all of us. And this is all teamwork. And then I just play my part in that. And sometimes I give a bit more. Sometimes I need to dial things back. And that is kind of the same in facilitation. First of all, it's teamwork. It's not about you. It's about something else. It's knowing your instrument so well where you don't have to focus on it anymore. Like know your tools,
know your content,
stuff,
know your process.
Know your content, know your stories, prepare for those kind of things.
Yeah.
Because once you are very much in tune with your physical and non-physical things, your stories, your tools, how you're going to run things, then you've got time to actually look at people. And that's where the power comes from. Because honestly, if somebody says, all right, guys, we're going to do a quick decision-making activity. So here's a matrix, here's how it works. I'm sorry, but anybody could do that. That would be easy if it was just that. The power comes from the tough conversations, moving things around and taking a group through decision-making in a way where they come up with something that's meaningful. And to do that, you can't be super focused on how does this graph work over here? And that's the same with the band. And the other one is playing in a band it's just a lot of fun. I've had so much fun on almost every project I've done. And I can probably, if I sit back with old friends, we can tell stories of about 10 years ago. We always remember it because it was like, there's always a funny character or something went wrong. I can probably recall every workshop or project I've done because of something like that. Oh, that's the one where they came up with that idea. Or that's the one where the lady kept saying this. And I remember that. And we just have so much fun. Yeah. We could honestly write a book about that. I work with about 10 people I've been working with for 10 years.
Yeah, cool. Wow.
And we have so many stories together. It's hilarious.
Oh, you're so lucky you've got colleagues that you can share that with, because I've certainly got my own, but I can't sort of turn to anyone and go, do you remember when this happened? Because that would be really funny. And usually at the end of the day, I'm just like laughing at it or horrified at what the hell's gone on during that session.
But that's good as well. At least it's a reaction. Yeah. Like at least it's not apathy. You know, you have a bit of fun. And sometimes
apathy is the worst, I think.
Of course, because then why would you do it? I would then look at people and say, well, then don't be here and stop wasting people's time. Other people can do this. If you don't want to do it, that's okay. You look a bit tired, buddy. You're a bit old, a bit tired. Maybe change your career. And that's very harsh to say, but I mean, it's true. It doesn't have to be old. What I mean is like some people just do it a lot. They kind of get very blasé with their content and they've told that story 20 times. I remember a client once told me like, oh, you're still telling that story. I'm like, you've heard it 25 times. They haven't. So it doesn't matter.
That's true. Yeah, because often when I run a workshop, I feel like I've got to keep reinventing like a new question for the icebreaker, and like I'm like, hang on, Leanne, like they're a brand new client. They haven't seen what you've done before. So just now that you've mastered this, bring it in. I've actually got to tell myself that, because otherwise I would just be like, what can I do that's different and new?
Yeah. Last build on that one. I think that's why sometimes clients will ask, I've had this where clients will go, oh, it needs to be more creative. And I go, why? And what it often is the element of it needs to look creative and fun is more important than actual outcome and output. And that's then another flag where you go, well, wait a minute, why are you so worried about the way it looks? Oh, it's got PRable value because the CEO is going to come in. Okay, well, then you need to let me know that, because that changes the entire brief. I thought you actually wanted to come up with output. And to come up with output, it doesn't need to be gimmicky. We can make it gimmicky if you want, but I'm always like, whatever works. People ask me like, is it good to do this in a session? Try it. I don't know. Yeah. Every group's different.
Yeah. It is funny because I facilitated a 3-day strategy day, and I was doing, how do you want this to feel and all that sort of stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, we just want to have a conversation. You're hiring me just to have a 3-day conversation. I'm happy to do that. But is that what you want? You don't want
what do you want me
priorities?
To do?
And like, they just need to talk to each other. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. And it was.
But I ask them what you want them to do, right? Sometimes I go, do you want me to record a bunch of things? What would you like me to do? Do you want me to give some input? What do you want? No, we just need to have a conversation. Okay, cool. Then you tell me what you want me to do then. Then I'll give them the steering wheel if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I was literally just the energy maintainer through the whole time, which suited me fine.
Vodka Red Bull.
Yeah, that's right. That should be my new LinkedIn title, energy maintainer or something like that.
Do it.
Yeah, I will. So just to wrap up, advice for first-time facilitators. I know you've been in the game for so many years. If you were to think back and give yourself advice when you were starting out in this world, what would you say to yourself?
Manage for outcome. Like with everything you do, go like, what is something that needs to be achieved here? Because at the end of the day, you're a facilitator, you're there to get people from A to B. You get people through something, whether that's learning, whether it's decision-making, whether that's sharing of information. You need to get people through something. The clearer you get on where are we going and what is the immediate output, and output could be a document or 5 steps or whatever it is. And then even bigger, like how does this little strategy document fit in with what they're doing? The clearer you get on that, the easier it will be to facilitate, because then with everything you do is this activity, is this question, is this model, is it adding to that? And if it's not, then it's a nice to have. There's nothing wrong with a nice to have every now and then. I used to be so hung up on the right model or approach that
Me too. Yeah.
And then you go like, okay, so we got the answer. It's penguins. Yeah, but we never asked for any animals. Like, oh, okay, well, we got a penguin. I think that's it. So keep your eye on that ball and just understand that facilitation. Anybody that tells you there's like a 3-step, there are approaches, but at the end of the day, it's very situational. So play with whatever there is and find your own style. But keep your eye on that output. That will make people better facilitators. I get annoyed by some people who, they might be good in traditional facilitation, but if you're not getting any results, then I would argue that you're not being the best you can be. And I think there's a lot of growth in that.
There's definitely 2 schools of thought on that. People that are like, oh, well, if we don't get the output, it's okay because we opened it up and there was a space for it. But then...
And I've made that mistake. Was like, wow, now we've got 150 creative ideas. Okay, so now what we're going to do?
Yeah, and that people feel a bit more overwhelmed.
Of course.
Yeah. So to wrap up, where can people find you if they want to know more, watch your videos, learn about
YouTube.
Innovation?
I'm very active on YouTube. Just find the magic sauce, not source. Some people say the magic sauce. The reason it's called the magic sauce, by the way, is because I was
going to ask you that, yeah.
I used to tell clients, they would ask me, why are you called the magic sauce? I said, because we're here. I don't want to change your entire business. The magic sauce is a bit of that hot sauce. We're like a Tabasco, like a creative concentrate. We just spice stuff up, you know. If you
did you say?
Yeah, or like hot sauce, but if your strategy sessions, if your insights work, if your research, if your prototypes are always same old, we spice that up. That's what the magic sauce is. We're not here to change everything. We're just here to spice stuff up so you come up with something new and something different. That's a bit more tangy. That's why it's called the magic sauce, rather than an overhaul and stuff like that. So find me on YouTube, The Magic Sauce. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, Joeri at The Magic Sauce. I don't add my last name, Schilders, because nobody knows how to say that. So I just say Joeri The Magic Sauce. And I love that you started with that. Now people think that's my last name, Joeri The Magic Sauce.
That's a cool last name. Joeri, thank you so much for everything that you've spoken about today. You know, we really did leapfrog between different topics. I love innovation. It's not something I specialize in, but I'm fascinated by it. I love coming up with ideas, and I also know it's important to execute. So that's probably another story, something to share later on. Definitely say to listeners, check out the channel. It is awesome, and give yourself some time, because you'll end up watching one video, then you'll be on there for an hour and wondering where your life has gone. So,
but don't watch too much either, because the magic sauce needs to be taken in dosages, small portions.
Okay.
Don't overkill. Thank you, Leanne, for having me. That was very nice to have me on the podcast, and thank you for indulging me in just waffling on about my work and my stuff.
Very helpful. Thanks so much, Joeri. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.